My name is Clwm McClarty. I was once part of a pirate radio station called For the People Radio. We used to call it FTP Radio. Back, let me see, about 1986 through to about 1990. The station didn't become legal not until '89. So we were broadcasting without a license, but we consider ourselves pioneers because of what we were doing on air from about 1986 onwards. The environment was very different, exceedingly different. You had emerging music, like electro, for instance. Electro was pretty big amongst the young people, would not be played by the mainstream radio stations. Reggae, more dancehall type reggae, not the dancehall that we know now, but the current music at that time was never ever played by ILR, independent local radio stations. In fact, the music scene around the 80s was pretty explosive, lots of new genres coming on board, but the established radio stations only focused on record sales that was derived from the charts. And I think the minimum sale at the time was about 100,000. Even though you had music being produced largely from the States, from the United States and also America, from Jamaica, other parts as well, it would never get the airplay that it deserved. However, the pirate stations, or like we like to call them, the protest stations, made it their point of duty to do everything the opposite of what the local ILR stations were actually doing. We contacted them on numerous occasions to ask them to play particular tracks, but more importantly to ask them why, really good soul music, hip hop, and R&B at the time were just not being played, and they would always use the excuse, well, it doesn't appear on our playlist, they're not selling enough music, is not being included in any of the charts, and the number one cause was, the number one reason that they always used was there's not enough listeners. However, during that period of time, there were as many pirate stations as there were legal stations, and these stations had a huge audience, massive audience. Even though it wasn't counted in terms of radar, which is the industry standard mechanism for measuring audience reach, it was always believed that the popularity of these stations were extremely good. Mainly, all you had to do was just walk along the streets and you hear the music beating out of someone's house, go to certain gigs that were happening at the time that were being promoted by these stations, and it was always a sellout. Always a sellout. And at the end of the day, they didn't recognize the fact that other music forms or other music genres could be as popular as pop music it was of the day, which we felt very strongly against. Hence the reason why we did what we did, basically, was to change the listening pattern. I mean, many of this pirate stations just came up on air because they could, or they did it to raise money because you could earn a lot of money from it. But in terms of what we did it mainly because we believed that there was other music genres out there that deserved to have airplay as much as pop music did. And hundreds of thousands of people felt exactly the same as well. So we knew we had an audience out there, and a huge one at that. By virtue of the stations being on air meant that it was accessible. And radio for us is almost like a natural medium, because certainly in my humble beginnings, I started my music endeavours through the sound system. I was part of a sound system, and many of the DJs that were on the radio station, or certainly on FTP, came from sound systems. And what they did, they just brought a completely new music genre to the airwaves, and people loved it. So in terms of making music popular, like reggae music more popular, the Pirates had a great hand in doing that. In fact, they had a great hand in even developing music as well, because when drum and bass came on stream, or came on the line, it was just seen as a couple of guys in their bedrooms mixing down music, using different speeds, different drum beats and all sorts. Well, those experiments that were happening in the bedroom eventually got onto the radio stations, and through the popularity of the radio stations, the music genre itself became hugely popular, very, very popular. Even down to Bhangra music, you would never hear that anywhere. But if you logged on, or if you tuned into a pirate station, you're guaranteed it'd be played. We certainly did. and we had a massive following. So it wasn't only just in terms of the reggae music itself that we gave more prominence to. It's also other music genres as well, which we know that the ILR, independent local radio stations, would never have played. They would never have played those at all because they don't feel as if there's an audience for it. Crazy. I don't call them pirates. I call them pioneering stations. For one simple reason. These are the stations that's going to take risks in terms of broadcast output. Protest stations or unlicensed stations naturally take risks. If there's a new music genre, they're going to push it out there because they know there's going to be listeners there. There might be small listeners at first, but eventually it's going to grow and grow exponentially as well, which is a good thing about these stations. They're not afraid of trying something new. The ILR stations tend to go with the tried and tested in most cases. Certainly over the past 10 years, their view has changed, mainly because they've been watching what the unlicensed stations have been doing. They've been watching them very closely to the point where if they hear a good DJ on one of those stations, they make it their business to find out who that person is and contact them and get them onto their station. One extra is testament to that. Many of the DJs, they cut their teeth on pirate stations. They will never be allowed to cut their teeth on legal radio stations. Not a chance in the world. They'd have to go through training, have to go through broadcast schools, they have to do all sorts of things just to be even before they even put an application. With a pirate station or protest station, the deal is very simple. If you've got a bag of music and you can present it in such a way that it's going to be entertaining to the masses, and you don't have to do much talking either. Just play the music because people just love to hear back-to-back music. Then you're on, basically. As long as you don't use music with lots of profane language in it, because obviously, after all, I mean, we've all got children, or most of us have children, and you have children listen to these stations. So we have a duty to protect them from music that would be seen as derogatory. However, it doesn't stop them from buying it and listening to it in their bedroom. But as long as we've taken the responsible step by saying music which has got a profane language in it is not allowed on the station. Certainly that's what we did at FTP, and the public thanked us for it. They thanked us for that because what we were providing was a good service. It was a different service, but a service that that played towards the needs and the wants of the audience as opposed to the needs and the wants of the radio station. Well, pirate stations or protest stations were really big in the late 70s. Yeah, about late 70s, like 78 or so, right through to the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. That's when they were really, really popular, and they're still popular now. But it's just that what's happening now, we're using new technology. So many of the pirates who were around back in the day and are around now, many of them have moved over to the internet as opposed to getting a transmitter in the back room and climbing onto the roof like what we used to do to put up aerials. Now they've gone way past that. Now they're dealing with new technology and everything's down the phone line. So that is what has caused a slight demise in the pirate station movement. But that is from only an analog sense. From a digital sense, there are thousands of radio stations now, whereas before there were only hundreds. And you can get, you name the music genre, you can find a station that plays just that, or plays a mixture of different styles. So in some ways, there has been a demise of the pirate radio station, but that's only in terms of technology, because those very same people now have moved over to the internet, where, as you know, you can have a worldwide audience. As long as your marketing is good, and you can market your station to different people, then you stand a really good chance of getting millions of people listening to you. So it's using the whole social network thing, which is really giving those stations the impetus to broadcast good music, different from what the ILR radio stations are broadcasting. My definition of a dub plate is a piece of music that was specially written or specially produced for you and you only. There may be different cuts of it out there, but a particular version of it with probably different voices, different production values, using different sound effects, what people use to make it more distinctive than the other cuts is what I would consider to be a dub plate. And dub plates originate from the regular sound system, of course, because back in those days when the sound systems were more prevalent, you couldn't play a big sound without having a good stack of dub plates. In fact, one of your boxes had to be filled with them, because sometimes you'd be playing like 5 or 6 hours of pure dub plates straight, not a problem. And the sound systems who can do that all day, all night, you know, play dub plate and play the type of dub plate they would be playing. You couldn't hope to get near to those artists, because it would cost you so much money to to get those artists to to appear on your record. But again, new technology has now made that easy to do, because now you can just send the music down the line. You know, you can send music as a WAV file or whatever file, and then the studio technician on the other end will just receive it, put it into his machine, and then you've got a proper piece of music there, you know, with the correct production values, and all one has to do is just voice it, add their own sound effects or add effects or whatever the case may be to make it into a dub plate.